Good morning. So my name is Joshua Proustro. I've been working at MAST for the last year. In the last 6 months, we've been working on porting our TAP service and sort of bringing it up to spec for TAP 1.1. I'd like to start off by mentioning the team that's been handling this. Many of you, of course, know Tom Donaldson and Teresa Dower. For the rest of the team, we have Ben Falk, Sarah Weissman, Chinwe Adiane, and myself. Their talents are all multitudinous, but to sort of pigeonhole them for a moment, Chinwe handles a lot of our automation and testing. Sarah does a lot of our metrics, our tracking, a lot of our DOI work. And Ben is an all-rounder, just great at everything, and I'm the new guy. So it's been a lot of fun. Now, for all of us, to sort of give some context, all of us have had a little bit of experience in VO concepts, VO resources. We've, had experience working on the services that MAST already supports, but I don't think any of us really had the experience of tackling a VO standard from scratch, which is sort of what we had to do. Now, for some, when I was putting this presentation together, I didn't want to focus so much on the technical standard for the service. I'm sure all of you have seen one or more presentations on, putting a TAP service together. So I didn't want to focus on that too much, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. So we've set up this new TAP service targeting version 1.1, and we were aiming to put it in our Python microservices framework that already exists at MAST. And the idea for that was to reuse a lot of the components we already use in our other services. So one of the parts of that is the Fast API web framework. We use that to handle setting up our API endpoints. It's a really simple, fast package to, put together basically anything you like. It's incredibly Pythonic. Setting up an endpoint is as easy as defining a function, type hinting some arguments for that function. Those become your query and your body parameters. And because it's powered by something called Pydantic, it will automatically validate requests that a user brings in, reject them if they're not one of the allowed values, as well as validating the responses that get sent back from the server to sort of prevent you from making mistakes. It was really useful also because we use this in so many of our other projects. It required no startup for our team to apply to TAP. For our asynchronous TAP management in UWS, we're using Celery, which is just a simple task queue worker system. A job gets put onto the queue in our backend, a worker picks it up, finishes it, puts it in the backend, which we're using Redis here for shared cache, and then it gets sent out to the user. It's really easily scalable, which is nice. It got some much needed visual improvements to landing pages. Not that I don't think many users ever see them, but we brought them up to our current mission MAST UI design. And for reasons that we've not quite figured out yet, it is faster in general. It's about 6 to 7 times faster for asynchronous queries. And while it's about on par with our current service, for synchronous queries in the thousands or tens of thousands of rows, it significantly improves the speed. But what I wanted to talk about is the experience of a team approaching the standard for the first time. And the biggest question is where to start. The truth is that's a difficult question to answer without having a previous implementer sort of guiding you along or an example service to reference. We couldn't really use the existing TAP service because it didn't fit the architecture that we were trying to rebuild it in. And given most of the team's minimal experience with building a service from scratch from the standards, we were, as I said, basically doing this from scratch and educating ourselves as we went. What we also found is there's a real bus factor. For those of you who may or may not know the term, it refers to if there was an unfortunate accident to a key member of your team, would you be able to efficiently move forward with the project? And what we found is that as we were designing this, we were deferring to Tom and Teresa many times for questions about the implementation. And if an unfortunate bus-related accident occurred, I don't know that we could have continued on in the way that we did. All of these were sort of compounded. Now, before I go on, I want to say that I hope I get invited back because I fear that this will just bring up what I assume are years and decades of frustrations that you all have had working with standards and reconciling them. But for us, it was a very new frustration. So that's sort of why I'm trying to put it out here. Almost all of the standards that are related to TAP all overlap in some way, right? This is one of the diagrams that you often see in VO architecture and descriptions of sort of the larger VO framework. But what we found is it's not a super helpful diagram to use when you're trying to draft up a service. For just a TAP service, it requires either a full or partial understanding of UWS, VASI, ADQL, DALI, VO tables, and how they interact with TAP. That is not immediately relevant or immediately discernible by any diagrams we found. That's something we had to end up drafting with the help of Tom and Teresa. TAP is a descendant of DALI, so are VASI. UWS is its own spec, but remains a core part of the asynchronous part of TAP. So like puzzling all that out is not trivial. For some of these, we were already helped by the fact that we had worked on them as part of other microservices projects. So we have a simple cone search service that we were able to use our VO table implementation for. And that was really useful. We had an ADQL to SQL Server translator already built for the previous service that we could just send our requests off to, send our queries off to, and have them come back in a well-formed format. And one of the other issues we also ran into was even when the standards approached the same concepts, many of them were ambiguously worded or maybe conflicted. And the trouble was to find out which one was the correct one to pick. In merge requests, in pull requests we put together for these services, something as simple as an overflow or a wait, one person might be able to reference this document, and it seemed perfectly valid. Another person might reference the TAP document, and that seems perfectly valid. So what do you end up picking? The problem exists to even optional features of these services, like wait. We found that PyVO's implementation of the wait parameter and their asynchronous queries assumes that a TAP 1.1 service is going to support it. And it's a very natural, logical conclusion to come to because it seems such a key part of it, but it is optional, right? So what we found was, and I don't mean to pick on PyVO too much, but if you ran it against a service that didn't support wait, you essentially ran into a denial of service attack. It would keep pinging us over and over again. And we're working on getting that figured out. But it wasn't just limited to that. Again, I'm sorry to bring up these frustrations, but they're very real for us, which was one of the questions I had when working on MaxRec overflows, right? When you send out a query and there are too many results, the server doesn't want to handle them, so you cut it off. It's very easily described in DALI for a VO table, but TAP can support other formats. The two that are called out are CSVs and TSVs. So I thought, okay, well, I'd like to be able to handle that as well. I want to cover all my bases. So I, of course, go to TAP 1.1. Reporting of overflow depends on the output format and is described in DALI. Perfect, no problem. Go to DALI. It gives you, like I mentioned, a nice summary of how to do that for VO tables. But what about these other formats? I'd like to be able to support these for my client too. And there's no way to do that. It doesn't mention it. But what TAP 1.0 does mention is that if the output table is if the output format is a VO table, it describes how to do it, and that no method of reporting an overflow is defined for formats other than VO table. And that is a very succinct and important part of that definition that got lost over time. And we found that broadly speaking, the level of detail in each standard or document varies between the version and sort of just that we didn't find a real pattern, and it was difficult to puzzle it all out. I'll keep going back to that word. Another one that we came up with is what standard will address any particular parameter or specification, which I mentioned. One of the other little ones that we ran into is what is a valid run ID? I was writing a validator to sort of make sure everything in our UWS spec was, compliant. So I was working in UWS, so I looked at the UWS, gives you a nice overview of what a run ID is and how it works. But I noticed that last line, which is, it's part of the specification of the protocol using the UWS standard. I thought, no problem. We're using TAP, I'll go to TAP. The run ID is fully described in DALI. Okay, no problem. I'll go to DALI. It is a string with a maximum length of 64 characters. That's what I was looking for the whole time. And it is that problem of, obviously there's a principle in programming of don't repeat yourself, right? I wouldn't expect every standard to repeat the same information over and over again. But what I would like to see is there be an obvious link, right? Write down what is unique for a run ID to the UWS standard. If there's nothing unique for TAP in general, fine. But what I love to see is just a link, right? There are many annotated sections in the HTML and the LaTeX for these documents. Just throw a link in there. It'll help us out a lot. And I think at least some of you all as implementers may have run into the same feeling. So what do you do about it? Broadly speaking, I don't know. And I figure that if there was an easy way, it would have been done already, right? Something beautiful would be something in between an overview, which the view is very good with, the technical standards on one side. And even the VO standards are very good for describing how users interact with something. But for implementers, there's something missing in between. I relate this to my wife as, if I want to build an airplane, I would need something between describing what an airplane is, generally speaking. It can fly, it can perform ADQL queries, and the Code of Federal Regulations for what an airplane can be. Show me how to build a paper airplane in between, right? Show me, broadly speaking, how that works. Another thing that I think I referenced in a question earlier is a must, should, may recommendation cheat sheet would be beautiful. I would love this. This is something I whipped together with some pretty dodgy code to go through the standard, pull out any sentence that had must, may, should, and put it into a little table. And that was great because I could at a glance say, this is what's required for ADQL, this is what's required for capabilities, and reference that. Beyond that, I mentioned some linking to various standards would be great. I had 4 or 5 tabs open anytime I was working on these projects. That was a lot. Check the fully described by references. I know that there's a lot of momentum and inertia in like adding new services and working with these interest groups. But like there's some linting that can definitely be done on the documents as they exist. And this all sort of goes back to the issue that we had, or the opportunity that we had as new implementers, in that a lot of these decisions seem like logical conclusions, right, from the standard, what you want to do. But they can be deceptively hard to do or confusing until you try to implement them. I'm going to wrap up there, but I did want to at least shout out Mark Taylor really quickly for his Taplint. This would have been impossible without this code, and I don't think it goes appreciated enough. I originally titled this talk, How 1600 Taplint Errors Brought Me to Bologna, and that's true. I did not really care about this project that much until I ran his code, saw that, and went, no, this cannot stand. And so I spent about a month reconciling all those things. All the criticism I don't have are not really important. It's fantastic, and yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk just a little bit, and I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.